A delayed response raised risk of grounding for drifting bulker. This is from the Maritime Executive, and it was published on the 14th of May, 2025. The Australian Transportation Safety Bureau has released a final report on the double near grounding of a bulker near Sydney in 2022, and it criticized emergency management officials for a series of delays in dispatching a full-size response tug. With just 3 arbor tugs dispatched to help, all too small to be of assistance, it was up to the vessel's crew to save their own ship, and the absence of an ocean-going tug prolonged the risk, according to the ATSB. On July 3, 2022, the bulker Portland Bay was moored near Port Kembla, New South Wales. A storm approached, and the master and arbor master decided it would be safer for the bulker to weather out the conditions at sea. Portland Bay got underway and steamed to an area about 12 to 15 nautical miles off the coast, where she maneuvered at a slow bell or drifted with the engines off, rolling heavily in gale force winds and heavy swells. Significant wave heights of about 15 feet were recorded nearby. At 5 a.m. on the morning of July the 4th, an auxiliary blower on the Portland Bay's main engine broke down. This limited speed to a dead slow ahead and effectively left the ship disabled, beamed to the seas and drifting towards shore at 2 to 3 knots. For the next 2 hours, the crew attempted to make emergency repairs to the main engine, but were not successful. 2 hours later, at 6:56, the chief mate made a call on the VHF and informed the port that his main engine had failed, and he requested tug assistance. The VTS Center passed this information on to the ship's agent and notified the Port Authority in New South Wales of the ship's situation. At this point, Portland Bay was just 6 miles off the coast and drifting at more than 4 knots towards the shore. At this speed, the master noted the ship would be on the rocks within an hour and a half. At 7:25, just an half an hour after his first distress call, the Sydney VTS Center, which had overheard the radio traffic, made the first move to provide towage. After a few calls, the local operator, Engaged Towing, began preparing a small arbor tug to respond to the scene. Switzer also began to mobilize the harbor tug out of Sydney. Neither vessel was designed for open ocean towage in gale force conditions. As the Portland Bay drifted closer to shore, shallow water created an opportunity for emergency anchoring. At 9:01 and again at 9:15, the ship's crew let go both anchors, then stopped the engines. The anchors held in 150 feet of water, about 1 mile off the shore. However, the ship's ground tackle was not designed for gale force conditions, and the Portland Bay continued to drag slowly eastward. At about 10:10, the first tug arrived, and the Portland Bay master asked it to push on the starboard side to reduce tension on the anchor cables. In heavy swells, the small tug hit Portland Bay's hull repeatedly, and the operation was discontinued to avoid serious damage. Instead, at 10:40, the tug began a series of attempts to rig a tow using the ship's mooring lines. The mooring lines was connected to the tug 3 times, but parted every time in heavy seas. 2 other small tugs soon arrived on the scene and rigged their own tow lines to the ship. Portland Bay was still dragging slowly towards the shore, and now just 7 lengths of cable off the beach. The engineering crew was working as fast as possible to rig a repair on the blower system and get the main engine back online. Those repairs appeared successful at last, and at 2:30 the operator advised that the vessel was ready to make full ahead. At 3:38, with propulsion restored and 2 tugs connected, Portland Bay weighed anchor and got underway with engines ahead slow. But just 9 minutes later, the engine had to be shut down again because of high temperatures and a fire, leaving the ship wholly reliant on the 2 tugs pulling on the bow. 1 tow line failed at 6:35, and the second tug was not able to continue the tow on its own. For the second time in a day, Portland Bay's master deployed anchors to avert a grounding. Throughout these evolutions, an emergency response tug remained at berth at the port of Newcastle, 90 miles away. In part because of communication issues, this larger and more capable tug was not ordered to deploy until 8 o'clock, 15 hours after the beginning of the emergency. And the Glenrock's crew did not get underway from the pier until 10:30. They battled 25-foot seas and 40-knot winds on the way south, and at times the tug could barely make speeds of 5 knots. It finally arrived on the scene at 1 p.m. on July the 5th. The crew connected a tow line at 3:15. Assisted by the arbor tugs, they got underway with Portland Bay in tow on the morning of July 6th, arriving in the harbor of Port Botany that afternoon. Based on the after-accident inspection, ATSB found that Portland Bay's engine was operating with a leaky fuel injector, excessive cylinder lubrication, and excess fuel injection, creating a buildup of sludge and deposits. In the heavy swells on July the 3rd and 4th, engine load and RPMs fluctuated widely, leading the turbocharger to surge. All this led to poor combustion, deposit accumulation, and blow-by, progressively degrading engine performance. And when the number 2 auxiliary blower went out, the engine no longer had enough airflow to make full speed. An imbalanced propeller and worn-out bearing housing from the previous repair may have also contributed to the blower's failure. In the ATSB's final report, the crew and operator came in for criticism for a 2-hour delay between the time that the vessel lost propulsion and the time that the first call was made for help. ATSB also found fault with the local and national authorities in their response. There were several hours of initial confusion over management until the Port Authority in New South Wales assumed control at 10:20 on July the 4th. At this point, the vessel was already anchored. The ATSB took particular issue in the Australian Maritime Safety Authority for not activating the region's designated emergency response tug until 15 hours after the incident began. Even if the Glenrock was based too far away to help immediately on the morning of the 4th, the delay in mobilizing the tug prolonged the emergency. It was the only asset in the region that was rated for the task and should have been activated right away. While the first responding tugs received praise for their actions in what were really challenging conditions, ultimately the 3 tugs that were dispatched were arbor tugs. They were ill-equipped and not capable of the task at hand, and nor were they ever going to be, based on their known characteristics and capabilities. It was only the emergency deployment of the ship's anchors on 2 separate occasions that prevented the ship from stranding. Like most problems, like most accidents, multiple factors involved in what went wrong here, but sending out small little harbor tugs into a storm to try and help this giant ship was just asking for trouble. They're lucky they didn't sink all 3 of these tugs or do some serious damage. They're definitely putting a lot of people's lives at risk by doing that. In the end, it all worked out. The ship didn't go aground. The tug that should have been there from the start got there eventually after fighting through some pretty tough weather and got things under control. And before you know it, they were all in safe harbor. Mistakes were made, that's for sure. In the end, though, nobody got hurt. The ship was saved and things did work out. But mistakes were definitely made here, and they put a lot of lives at risk, that's for sure. All right, guys, there it is. As always, thanks for watching. If you're new here and you like these kind of videos, don't forget to subscribe before you leave, and I'll see you on the next one.